By now, we have investigated plants pretty thoroughly. In the previous 2 videos in this series, we measured how a plant's mass changes as it grows, and we also observed how light affects the way that plants move carbon dioxide gas around. So we know what we observed, but we haven't gone to the trouble to put our observations together into a cohesive working model for plant growth and function. Let's do that right now. Before we go any further, let's consider the goal of this video. After watching this video, you should be able to use a model with macroscopic, microscopic, and nanoscopic scales to illustrate how plants grow and function. This is a tall order, but we are now equipped to do it. To start, let's just review what we already found out. First of all, we used a scale to measure the dry mass as plants grew, and we found that the mass of the plants increased during the growth period. Next, we used bromothymol blue and found out that plants draw in CO2 when the plants are in light. They emit CO2 when they are not in light. And if we want, we can summarize our results in this nifty little table. We saw that the dry mass increased as the plants grew, and we also found that the plants absorbed CO2 while in the light, but that they emitted CO2 when they were not in light. So those are the basics, but how are they connected? What do you think is the connection between light and mass when talking about plants? Take a moment to pause the video and see if you can come up with an idea or an inference about how light and mass might be connected in this situation. If you think about it, there is really one thing that can be happening here. As long as there is light, plants absorb CO2 molecules from the atmosphere. All molecules, even those found in gases, are made of atoms and therefore contain mass, so it's safe to conclude that the reason the plants gained mass is because they were absorbing CO2 from the air. That is where the new mass came from. Next time you go outside, look around. All those trees you see, all the grass, all the shrubs and berries, all the moss, ferns, vines, all the potted plants, all the apple orchards and vineyards, all the fields of wheat and corn and other crops. These organisms draw their mass from carbon dioxide in the air. So that massive tree in your neighbor's yard, it didn't get its mass from the soil, or water, or light. It drew its mass straight out of the air. This should blow your mind. Plants have this almost magical ability to grow and gain mass just from their exposure to carbon dioxide gas in our atmosphere. This is a mean feat, especially considering that carbon dioxide only makes up about 400 parts per million in our atmosphere. That's less than 0.1%. Let's put this into perspective. This field of dots represents a sample of air particles. Most are nitrogen, a good fraction are oxygen, a few represent argon and water vapor, and this one single particle represents carbon dioxide. So CO2 is relatively rare in our atmosphere, but plants are effective at capturing it even at this tiny concentration. You might even know that animals breathe out CO2 during cellular respiration, so the odds are good that the houseplant in your living room draws some of its mass from the breath that comes out of your lungs. So enough romanticizing about plants. We've still got work to do. Our goal is to develop a working model that incorporates the macroscopic, microscopic, and nanoscopic scales. We did this in our series on animals. Let's do it right now for plants. First of all, we know that plants emit CO2 when there is no light. What do you think it means when an organism produces CO2? What process is going on? The process that must be going on here is cellular respiration. We know this chemical reaction is taking place because we saw that in the dark, plants emit CO2, much like animals do. An organism can really only do that through cellular respiration. Let's look at this at the microscopic level. In the process of respiration, food molecules such as sugar are combined with oxygen in an organism's cells. This takes place in organelles called mitochondria. The mitochondria extract energy from the food molecules to power various functions. Then the cell takes the leftover waste molecules, CO2 and H2O, and gets rid of them. You might remember from our series on animals that the balanced reaction looks like this. But remember that the whole point of cellular respiration isn't to breathe oxygen or to digest sugar. The point is to generate energy that the cell can use to function. Essentially, respiration converts chemical energy into other forms of energy, such as movement and heat. So, we have to maintain respiration as a part of our model for how plants grow and function. But hold on a second. Respiration requires food molecules, like sugar, to get started. Where do the plants get those food molecules? It turns out we already sort of have the answer. We observed that in the light, the plants absorbed CO2, and we concluded that this was where their increased mass came from. This is a perfect source of molecules to produce food, and it's the basis of a process you've certainly heard of. Photosynthesis is a word that has three parts. Photo means light, thesis means to put or place, and syn means together. So photosynthesis roughly translates to using light to put things together. What could a plant be putting together inside its cells? Take a moment to pause the video and come up with an idea about what the plant cells might be building or putting together. Let's see what's going on here. A plant performs photosynthesis inside a tiny green organelle called a chloroplast. This structure uses light to put together CO2 molecules and build sugars. So photosynthesis captures light energy from the sun and stores it away in sugar molecules. This is where the sugar comes from to drive cellular respiration in plants. But if we look at our model as it stands right now, something isn't quite right with our reaction for photosynthesis. Notice that we've got CO2 coming into the chloroplast and sugar is being produced. But sugar contains hydrogen, while CO2 doesn't. That means our reaction for photosynthesis is not balanced. Let's see if we can resolve this issue using our molecular modeling kit. Let's place our reactants on the left and our products on the right. We know the plant cell starts with carbon dioxide and somehow ends up with sugar. Since the sugar has 6 carbon atoms in it, we will need to start with 6 CO2 molecules. The sugar also has 12 hydrogen atoms, which we can provide with water molecules in the reactants. Since each water molecule has 2 hydrogen atoms, 6 water molecules provide enough hydrogen for the sugar. The leftover oxygen gives us enough atoms to produce 6 molecules of O2 as one of the products. Let's see what photosynthesis looks like when we write it out as a balanced chemical reaction. And it is worth noting that the balanced reaction for photosynthesis is the exact opposite of the balanced reaction for cellular respiration. See how the reactions are just mirror images of each other? Let's zoom back to the microscopic level again and add the balanced reaction for photosynthesis to our model of how plants function. Now we know that water and oxygen are involved here, and we can give them their proper places in our model. So now we can see that light energy powers the process of photosynthesis, which takes place in the chloroplasts of the plant's cells. Light energy is converted into chemical energy, which is locked away inside the sugar. This is why animals eat plants. Plants do the hard work of gathering carbon atoms to make food. Animals are just mooching off of plants by eating the food that the plants made on their own. Once that sugar is produced, its chemical energy can be released through cellular respiration as heat, movement, or other useful energy for the plant. So our model is looking good, but there's one part we haven't considered yet. Remember how the plants gained mass as they grew? Now, how is that possible? As far as we've modeled, the mass goes into the sugars, which are then immediately burned off in cellular respiration to power the cells. Currently, our model doesn't really explain the gain in mass. At this point, pause the video one last time and see if you can come up with an idea about how the plant gained mass. So let's see what's going on here. The plant cells produce sugar through photosynthesis, and the plant uses most of the sugar for cellular respiration. Any extra sugars it produces, it saves them and sets them aside. This could explain why the plants gained mass in our investigation earlier. As they performed photosynthesis and drew CO2 out of the air, they stored sugar in their tissues, resulting in an increase in mass. And if you watched the video on biosynthesis, you know that these sugar molecules that the plant cells store can be used as raw materials for building a wide array of other molecules, such as fats, proteins, or even other sugars. The most important molecule that the plant cell can synthesize from sugar is called cellulose. Cellulose is a long, tough, organic polymer made of repeating units of sugar. It's kind of like starch, only it can't be digested by animals. Cellulose makes up the structure of cell walls, which gives plants their toughness. And because there are so many plants on Earth, cellulose is probably the most abundant organic molecule by mass on our planet. Let's review the goal of this video to see if you met it. After watching this video, you should be able to use a model with macroscopic, microscopic, and nanoscopic scales to illustrate how plants grow and function. If you can't do that, go back and watch the parts of the video you don't understand. We have learned a lot in this video series on plants. Thanks to some very basic observations of mass and CO2, we now have a complete working model for how plants grow and function. With our model in hand, we can explain lots of behaviors of plants by appealing to the macroscopic, microscopic, and nanoscopic scales. We hope that this video has inspired in you a new appreciation and reverence for the plant life on our planet. Without plants on Earth, there would be no food, and there would be no oxygen, and so animal life would not be possible without plants. This is why protecting forests, oceans, and other natural areas is important for ensuring the health of our planet and our own species. Until next time, remember, you can learn anything. Mm-hmm.